Exercise 5.12 print average. We're going to write a method. It's going to be called print average, and we're accepting a scanner for the console as a parameter. We're going to repeatedly prompt the user for numbers. So we're going to take these values. Once any number less than 0 is typed, we are going to calculate the average of all the non-negative numbers and then display it. So we are only printing, not returning anything. That means we are going to have a public static void. It's going to be obviously called print average, and then we have nothing in our, oh, we do have a parameter, sorry, we have a scanner, and we'll call it input, and then we can end our method header. So inside of here, what we're going to need to do is create a few variables. We're going to run a while loop, and we're going to run this while our number is not negative. We have some other instruction down here. If the first number typed is negative, do not print the average, and we're going to handle that in our while loop. So when we do the average for something, we are going to need a counter variable because we're going to count all of the values that are inputted, and then we're going to divide it by how many values are inputted once we add all those values up. So we are going to do int, we'll do count, we'll set it equal to 0. We're also going to need to store the user's inputs, and the reason why we're storing the user's input is we're going to compare it. We're going to see if it's greater than or equal to 0. Once we do that, if it's greater than 0, we are just going to add it to our average. Otherwise, we are going to just quit. And if it's not the first time, we are going to calculate the average and print it. If it is, then we're just going to quit. So we're going to say average. Oh, I'm sorry, not average, but answer is equal to 0. That does lead us into our average though. We're going to have double average, which is going to store the actual value right here that is a double. So that's why it is a double average. I mentioned a while loop. We're going to run this in a while loop. So we are going to say while our answer is greater than or equal to 0. So whatever the user inputs, as long as it's greater than or equal to 0, we're going to be inside of here. So we are inside of here. Now we need to actually prompt the user. So we're going to have a system.out.print line, where inside of here, we're asking to the user to type a number, and then we can end this and close this up. So this is the prompt. We actually want it to be a print instead of print line, so the user input is on the same line. Now we're going to store this in the answer. So answer is going to be equal to input, which is the scanner, dot next int. And so that is it for that line. So if our answer is greater than, or we'll just say equal to 0, we are going to be inside of here. And again, if it's greater than or equal to 0, we are going to add this to our average. We're not taking the average yet, we're just adding the values together. So we're going to say our average is going to be plus equals to the answer. So we're putting answer, we're adding it with the averages, the previous ones, and we are going to want to increment our how many values we have. So we're just going to do count plus plus, and then we can end this if statement. Now we're going to assume that the user inputs a negative number. So this will not run, and we are going to be done. We want to then exit out of here and calculate the average. So let's calculate the average here. We're going to say if, because this is something totally different, if our count is greater than or equal to 0, and this actually will take care of this right here, because that means count cannot be 0, which means we have to have at least some positive value in here. So if count is greater than or equal to 0, our average is going to be equal to our average divided by our count. So we're really just updating our average. And that's in that if statement, right? Once we're done with this, we can close our while loop. And then we're going to be down here, and we want to print out this average right here. We only want to print it out though if we have not a negative number as our first value. So we're going to do if our count does not equal to 0 again. This is a great check we can just reuse. If our count does not equal 0, we're going to have a system.out.print line, where inside of here we print out the string average was, and then we append to it our actual average. And so we can end this line and then end our function. We'll click submit here. It's going to run this test. Hasn't been initialized. Oh, that is a problem. We need to set our average equal to 0 just to initialize it. We always need to initialize something before we can actually start using it. So once that is corrected, it's going to contact the server, run all the tests, and we have not passed. So let's see what the problem is. So our values seem to be right, but our average is off. And so if we come back here and we look at some things, I see the problem. And it's because I treated this as something separate, totally separate than this. So the issue here is that this ran and this ran. And this updated our average every single time it ran because I said it was totally different, but I misread it. This should not be an if, this should just be an else if. And again, the reason for that is if we have it as an if, this is going to execute and this is going to execute if our count does not equal to 0. So it's going to execute every single time but the first time, right? But we only want it to execute if our answer is greater than or equal to 0, and if our answer is not greater than or equal to 0. So if the user types like a negative number, because this is for the ending, and if it's not on the first try. Another way we could do this is have our if statement down here, and we could put count does not equal to 0, and then we can do the two and symbols, and we have that our answer has to be greater than or equal to 0 as well. But this is just an easier way to do it. So it's all kind of in this else if with this if statement right here. So that's important to note. We've passed 9 out of 9 tests, and that is it for Practice It 5.12, which is print average.